Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that a driver preparing for the Fermanagh driver test is running late for an important appointment. Considering the regulatory framework of Northern Ireland, which of the following approaches best demonstrates responsible and safe driving practice in this situation? Option A. Weaving through traffic at speed faster than the surrounding vehicles to gain time. Option B. Proceeding through a red traffic light if no other vehicles are immediately visible. Option C. Adhering strictly to all posted speed limits and traffic signals, even if it means arriving late for the appointment. Option D. Exceeding the speed limit on clear stretches of road to make up for lost time. The correct answer is C. Adhering strictly to all posted speed limits and traffic signals, even if it means arriving late for the appointment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to reach a destination with the paramount importance of road safety and adherence to traffic laws. The pressure of being late can lead to impulsive decisions that compromise safety and legal compliance. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and legality over personal urgency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing adherence to all posted speed limits and traffic signals, even if it means arriving later than intended. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the fundamental principles of road safety enshrined in the Fermanagh Driver Handbook and the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1995. These regulations are designed to prevent accidents by ensuring drivers operate their vehicles predictably and at speeds appropriate for the conditions. Ethical considerations also dictate that a driver has a responsibility to themselves and other road users to operate their vehicles safely and legally, thereby minimizing risk. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves exceeding the speed limit to make up for lost time. This is a direct violation of the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1995, which mandates adherence to posted speed limits. This action significantly increases the risk of accidents due to reduced reaction times and increased stopping distances, and it demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other road users. Another incorrect approach is to run a red traffic light when no other vehicles are immediately visible. This is a serious breach of traffic regulations and poses an extreme danger. Traffic signals are in place to manage the flow of traffic and prevent collisions at intersections. Disregarding them, even when seemingly clear, creates a high risk of a catastrophic accident with oncoming traffic that may not be immediately apparent. A third incorrect approach is to weave through traffic at excessive speeds. This maneuver is inherently dangerous as it requires precise judgment of gaps in traffic and the speed of other vehicles. It violates the principle of predictable driving and significantly increases the likelihood of a collision, contravening the spirit and letter of safe driving practices promoted by the Fermanagh driver test syllabus. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legality above all else. This involves a conscious assessment of the situation, recognizing the potential consequences of deviating from safe driving practices, and making a deliberate choice to adhere to regulations. When faced with time pressure, the professional driver should consider alternative, legal solutions, such as leaving earlier for future journeys or communicating delays to the intended recipient, rather than compromising safety. The Fermanagh driver test assesses not just the ability to operate a vehicle, but the capacity to do so responsibly and in accordance with the law. Question 2. Market research demonstrates that some individuals preparing for the Fermanagh driver test possess extensive local knowledge of specific road segments within the Fermanagh area. If an examiner directs a candidate to follow a particular route, and the candidate believes they know a more efficient or safer alternative route based on their familiarity with the area, what is the most appropriate course of action for the candidate to demonstrate their understanding of the testing requirements as set by the Department for Infrastructure in Northern Ireland? Option A. Politely question the examiner's route choice, explaining why your alternative would be more effective for the test. Option B. Strictly follow the examiner's directions and the designated route without comment or deviation. Option C. Subtly alter the route to incorporate your familiar shortcuts, assuming the examiner will not notice. Option D. Inform the examiner that you know a better route and suggest they follow your lead. The correct answer is B. Strictly follow the examiner's directions and the designated route without comment or deviation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to navigate a situation where their personal knowledge of a specific road segment conflicts with the official guidance provided by the Fermanagh Driver Testing Center. The challenge lies in balancing personal experience with adherence to established testing protocols and safety regulations, ensuring that the test reflects objective assessment rather than subjective familiarity. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the driving test and public safety standards mandated by the Department for Infrastructure in Northern Ireland. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the instructions and route provided by the examiner, regardless of personal familiarity with the area. This approach is correct because the Fermanagh driver test is designed to assess a candidate's ability to follow instructions, react appropriately to various road conditions, and demonstrate safe driving techniques in a standardized manner. The examiner's route is predetermined to cover specific testing objectives and assess a range of driving skills. Deviating from this route, even with perceived local knowledge, undermines the standardized assessment process and could lead to missing critical testing elements, thereby failing to meet the requirements of the Department for Infrastructure's testing standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to inform the examiner of perceived shortcuts or alternative routes based on personal knowledge. This is professionally unacceptable because it attempts to influence the standardized testing procedure with subjective information, potentially leading to an incomplete or biased assessment. It disregards the examiner's role and the established testing curriculum. Another incorrect approach is to subtly deviate from the examiner's instructions to utilize a familiar route. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it constitutes dishonesty and a failure to comply with direct instructions from the testing authority. It compromises the integrity of the test and could result in the candidate demonstrating skills not relevant to the prescribed assessment. A further incorrect approach is to question the examiner's chosen route, suggesting it is inefficient or suboptimal. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the examiner's authority and the established testing methodology. It can create an adversarial testing environment and distract from the primary objective of assessing the candidate's driving competence according to the Department for Infrastructure's guidelines. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and direct instructions. This involves understanding that standardized tests are designed for objective evaluation and that personal knowledge, while valuable in everyday driving, should not supersede the formal testing process. The framework should emphasize clear communication with the examiner, focusing on understanding and executing instructions rather than attempting to alter the testing parameters. The ultimate goal is to demonstrate competence within the defined assessment framework, ensuring public safety and upholding the standards set by the relevant regulatory bodies. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that during a Fermanagh driver's test, a candidate encounters a prominent red circular sign with a horizontal white bar. Considering the regulatory framework of Northern Ireland, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant action for the candidate to take? Option A. Assume the sign is only applicable if other vehicles are present and proceed if the road is empty. Option B. Interpret the sign as a warning and proceed with caution if the path appears clear. Option C. Stop the vehicle and wait for the sign to change or for further instructions from an examiner. Option D. Recognize the sign as a mandatory prohibition and do not enter the area indicated. The correct answer is D. Recognize the sign as a mandatory prohibition and do not enter the area indicated. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply road signage and traffic laws in real time, under the pressure of a test. The Fermanagh driver's test, governed by Northern Ireland's road traffic legislation, demands not only knowledge of the highway code, but also the ability to make safe and lawful decisions in dynamic driving situations. The challenge lies in distinguishing between advisory signs and mandatory instructions, and understanding the consequences of noncompliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a driver recognizing the sign as a mandatory instruction and proceeding accordingly. This approach is correct because the no entry sign, often depicted as a red circle with a horizontal white bar, is a universally recognized traffic sign in the UK, including Northern Ireland, that legally prohibits entry into a specific area or road. Failure to comply with such a sign constitutes a contravention of traffic regulations, potentially leading to a driving test failure, and more importantly, creating a significant safety hazard. The legal basis for this lies in the Road Traffic Northern Ireland, Order 1995, and associated regulations concerning traffic signs and road markings. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to treat the sign as advisory, assuming it is a suggestion rather than a prohibition. This is a regulatory failure because it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of traffic sign meanings. Advisory signs typically use different shapes and colors, e.g., blue circles for mandatory actions, yellow diamonds for warnings, and are clearly distinguishable from mandatory prohibition signs. Ignoring a mandatory sign is a direct contravention of traffic law. Another incorrect approach is to proceed if no other vehicles are present. This is an ethical and regulatory failure because the legality of entering a prohibited area is not dependent on the presence of other traffic. The prohibition is absolute, regardless of immediate perceived risk. This approach suggests a disregard for established rules and a reliance on subjective risk assessment, which is contrary to the principles of safe and lawful driving. A further incorrect approach is to stop and wait indefinitely without understanding the sign's meaning or seeking clarification. While caution is important, indefinite waiting due to a lack of comprehension of a clear, mandatory sign indicates a deficiency in basic driving knowledge and situational awareness, which are core requirements for passing the Fermanagh driver's test. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the type of traffic sign presented. They should then recall the meaning and legal implications of that specific sign according to the UK Highway Code and relevant Northern Ireland road traffic legislation. If unsure, a professional driver would err on the side of caution and assume the sign is mandatory until they can confirm its meaning. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to traffic law and safety over personal interpretation or convenience. Question 4. Process analysis reveals a driver applicant in Fermanagh has been diagnosed with a medical condition that could potentially affect their ability to drive safely. Considering the regulatory framework governing driver licensing in Northern Ireland, which of the following actions best represents the applicant's professional and legal obligation? Option A. Withhold information about the diagnosed condition, believing it is a private matter and will not affect their driving. Option B. Directly inform the driver and vehicle agency, DVA, about the diagnosed condition and provide any necessary medical reports as requested. Option C. Assume that because they have not had an accident, the condition is not relevant and therefore does not need to be disclosed to the DVA. Option D. Inform their driving instructor about the condition but not the DVA, assuming the instructor will advise appropriately. The correct answer is B. Directly inform the driver and vehicle agency, DVA, about the diagnosed condition and provide any necessary medical reports as requested. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a license in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, concerning the disclosure of a medical condition. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's right to privacy with the paramount importance of public safety on the roads. The driver and vehicle agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland has specific regulations regarding medical fitness to drive, and failure to comply can have serious consequences for both the individual and the public. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal obligations are met without causing undue distress or discrimination to the applicant. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the applicant directly informing the DVA about their diagnosed condition, providing any necessary medical reports as requested. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the requirements of the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, as amended, and associated DVA guidelines concerning medical fitness to drive. These regulations place a legal obligation on individuals to notify the DVA of any medical condition that could affect their ability to drive safely. By proactively disclosing the information and cooperating with medical assessments, the applicant demonstrates responsibility and compliance, allowing the DVA to make an informed decision based on current medical advice and road safety principles. This ensures transparency and upholds the integrity of the licensing process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is for the applicant to withhold information about their diagnosed condition, believing it is a private matter and will not affect their driving. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It breaches the legal requirement to disclose relevant medical information to the DVA, potentially endangering themselves and others if the condition does impair their driving ability. Ethically, it is a failure to act with integrity and to prioritize public safety. Another incorrect approach is for the applicant to only inform their driving instructor, but not the DVA. While informing an instructor might seem like a step towards managing the situation, it does not fulfill the legal obligation to report to the licensing authority. The driving instructor is not authorized to assess medical fitness to drive or to grant a license. This approach fails to comply with DVA regulations and creates a false sense of security regarding their licensing status. A further incorrect approach is for the applicant to assume that because they have not had an accident, the condition is not relevant and therefore does not need to be disclosed. This is a dangerous assumption and a regulatory failure. The DVA's concern is not just about past incidents, but about the potential for future impairment. Many medical conditions can affect driving without having previously caused an accident. The legal duty is to disclose, allowing the DVA to assess the risk, not for the individual to self-assess their risk to the public. Professional reasoning. Professionals dealing with such situations should adopt a framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves understanding the specific reporting obligations under the relevant legislation, in this case, Northern Ireland Road Traffic Law. When faced with a potential medical condition affecting driving, the professional decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the legal duty to report. 2. Encouraging the individual to proactively disclose the information to the relevant authority, the DVA. 3. Assisting the individual in obtaining and submitting any required medical documentation. 4. Emphasizing that self-assessment of risk is not a substitute for official assessment by the licensing body. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all drivers are medically fit to operate a vehicle safely on public roads, in accordance with the law. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing stricter medical review protocols for drivers with certain chronic conditions could reduce accident rates, but also increase administrative burdens for the driver and vehicle agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland. Considering these factors, what is the most appropriate course of action for a driving examiner when presented with a medical report indicating a driver has a condition that may affect their ability to drive safely? Option A. Rely on general medical knowledge about the condition without consulting the DVA's specific guidance for drivers in Northern Ireland. Option B. Grant the driving license immediately, assuming the driver's self-assessment of their fitness to drive is accurate, as the administrative burden of further review is significant. Option C. Thoroughly review the medical report against the DVA's specific guidelines for driving with that condition, and if necessary, request further clarification or recommend a driving assessment to determine fitness to drive. Option D. Deny the driving license outright based on the diagnosis alone, to err on the side of caution and avoid any potential risk. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly review the medical report against the DVA's specific guidelines for driving with that condition, and if necessary, request further clarification or recommend a driving assessment to determine fitness to drive. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver to operate a vehicle with the potential long-term risks associated with their medical condition. The driving examiner must exercise careful judgment to ensure public safety without unfairly restricting an individual's mobility, adhering strictly to the regulations set forth by the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland. The core tension lies in interpreting medical advice and applying it to the specific requirements of driving. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the provided medical information in conjunction with the DVA's specific guidelines for medical conditions affecting driving. This approach prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the condition's impact on driving ability, considering factors such as the severity, prognosis, and any potential treatments. The examiner must then apply the DVA's established criteria for fitness to drive, which may involve seeking further clarification from the medical professional or recommending specific driving assessments if the initial information is insufficient. This aligns with the DVA's mandate to ensure road safety by only licensing individuals who meet the required medical standards, as outlined in their guidance documents and relevant legislation concerning driving and medical fitness. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately grant a license based solely on the applicant's assertion that they feel fit to drive, disregarding the medical report. This fails to uphold the DVA's duty of care to the public and contravenes regulations that mandate medical fitness for driving. Another incorrect approach is to deny the license solely based on the diagnosis without a detailed assessment of its impact on driving capability. This could be discriminatory and may not reflect the nuances of the condition or the individual's ability to manage it safely. Finally, relying on outdated or generic medical advice not specific to driving in Northern Ireland would also be an error, as it would not align with the DVA's current regulatory framework and assessment standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach. First, gather all relevant information, including the applicant's self-declaration and the medical report. Second, consult the specific regulatory guidelines of the DVA concerning the reported medical condition and its implications for driving. Third, if the information is ambiguous or incomplete, seek clarification from the medical professional or recommend further assessments. Fourth, make a decision based on a holistic evaluation of the medical evidence against the DVA's established criteria for fitness to drive, always prioritizing public safety. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of minor speeding infractions by a Fermanagh driver over a 6-month period. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to address this observed behavior? Option A. Disregard the recorded minor speeding infractions as insignificant and not requiring any intervention. Option B. Contact the driver's employer to inform them of the speeding incident without first speaking to the driver. Option C. Immediately report the driver to the Fermanagh Licensing Authority for potential license suspension due to repeated minor infractions. Option D. Review the data to understand the context and frequency of the infractions, then contact the driver to discuss the observations, explain potential risks, and offer guidance on safe driving practices. Correct answer is D. Review the data to understand the context and frequency of the infractions, then contact the driver to discuss the observations, explain potential risks, and offer guidance on safe driving practices. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of minor speeding infractions by a Fermanagh driver over a 6-month period. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need to address potential safety risks with the driver's right to privacy and avoiding overreaction to isolated incidents. A careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate intervention. The best approach involves a proactive, educational intervention. This entails reviewing the recorded data to identify the specific circumstances and frequency of the speeding incidents. Following this review, the driver should be contacted to discuss the observed patterns, explain the potential risks associated with even minor speeding in Fermanagh, and offer resources or guidance on safe driving practices. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of responsible risk management and driver education, aiming to prevent future incidents through understanding and support rather than immediate punitive measures. It respects the driver's autonomy while fulfilling the duty to promote road safety within the Fermanagh context. An incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the matter to the licensing authority for potential suspension based solely on the recorded minor infractions. This is ethically problematic as it fails to consider the context or the possibility of a learning curve for the driver. It also bypasses opportunities for constructive intervention and could lead to disproportionate consequences. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the data, assuming that minor speeding is insignificant and poses no real threat. This is a failure in risk assessment and proactive safety management. It neglects the cumulative effect of minor infractions and the potential for them to escalate or indicate a disregard for road safety regulations specific to Fermanagh. A further incorrect approach would be to contact the driver's employer without the driver's consent or a clear policy mandate. This constitutes a breach of privacy and could damage the driver's professional standing without due process or a thorough understanding of the situation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data-driven assessment, proportionate response, and a commitment to education and prevention. This involves understanding the specific regulatory environment of Fermanagh, considering the severity and frequency of observed behaviors, and choosing interventions that are both effective and ethically sound, always aiming to improve safety outcomes. Question 7. During the evaluation of a learner-driver's practical test on a rural road near Enniskillen, County Fermanagh, an examiner observes an oncoming vehicle approaching a blind bend at a speed that suggests it may not be able to safely navigate the bend. The learner-driver has not yet reacted. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to take, adhering to the Fermanagh driver testing regulations? Option A. Take control of the vehicle by grabbing the steering wheel or applying the brakes to prevent a potential collision. Option B. Immediately shout instructions to the learner driver such as brake now or steer left to ensure the situation is managed safely. Option C. Observe the learner driver's reaction to the approaching hazard, assessing their judgment and response without immediate intervention unless an accident is imminent. Option D. Allow the test to continue without comment, trusting that the learner driver will eventually perceive and react to the hazard. The correct answer is C. Observe the learner driver's reaction to the approaching hazard, assessing their judgment and response without immediate intervention unless an accident is imminent. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the immediate safety of the applicant and the public with the need to assess the applicant's ability to manage risk independently. The examiner must avoid being overly directive, which would invalidate the test, while also ensuring that a potentially hazardous situation is not allowed to escalate. The decision hinges on interpreting the applicant's actions and judgment in a dynamic environment, which is subjective and requires a nuanced understanding of the Fermanagh driver testing regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the examiner observing the applicant's response to the emerging hazard, noting their decision-making process, and assessing whether their actions were appropriate and timely, even if not perfectly executed. This aligns with the Fermanagh driver testing regulations' emphasis on evaluating the applicant's independent judgment and risk management skills. The examiner's role is to assess the applicant's ability to anticipate, identify, and respond to hazards, not to intervene unless absolutely necessary to prevent an accident. By allowing the applicant to attempt to manage the situation, the examiner gains a true insight into their competency. Correct approaches analysis. Allowing the applicant to proceed without any comment or intervention, despite the clear and present danger of the oncoming vehicle, would be a failure to uphold the examiner's duty of care and could lead to an accident, violating the core safety principles of the Fermanagh driver testing regulations. This approach prioritizes the test's integrity over immediate safety, intervening immediately by shouting or grabbing the steering wheel, while prioritizing safety would negate the purpose of the test. Fermanagh driver testing regulations require the examiner to assess the applicant's independent driving skills. Such an intervention would demonstrate that the applicant was not capable of managing the situation, but it would also mean the test could not be completed as an assessment of their independent driving. Providing explicit instructions on how to react, such as brake now or steer left, would be overly directive. This would not accurately assess the applicant's ability to make their own decisions and manage the risk, contravening the spirit and letter of the Fermanagh driver testing regulations, which aim to evaluate a driver's proactive hazard perception and response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Hazard identification, recognizing the oncoming vehicle as a significant hazard. 2. Risk assessment, evaluating the immediate danger to safety. 3. Intervention threshold, determining if the applicant's current actions are sufficient to mitigate the risk or if intervention is required to prevent an accident. 4. Test integrity vs. safety, balancing the need to assess the applicant's skills with the paramount duty of ensuring safety. In this case, the examiner must assess if the applicant's actions, even if imperfect, demonstrate an attempt to manage the risk, and if the situation is still within the applicant's control to resolve safely. Question 8. What factors should a driver in Northern Ireland consider when assessing their fitness to drive if they begin to feel unwell during a journey? Option A. The likelihood of experiencing more severe symptoms later in the journey. Option B. The urgency of reaching their destination and the distance remaining to travel. Option C. The severity of the symptoms, potential impact on concentration and reaction time, and the availability of safe places to stop and rest. Option D. Whether other drivers on the road appear to be driving cautiously. The correct answer is C. The severity of the symptoms, potential impact on concentration and reaction time, and the availability of safe places to stop and rest. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the overarching responsibility to public safety and adherence to traffic laws in Northern Ireland. The pressure to reach a destination quickly, especially when feeling unwell, can lead to impulsive decisions that compromise safety. Careful judgment is required to prioritize the well-being of oneself and others on the road. The best professional approach involves recognizing the limitations of one's physical condition and making a safe, responsible decision that prioritizes health and compliance with road traffic regulations. This means pulling over safely and seeking appropriate assistance or rest, rather than continuing to drive while impaired. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of care owed to other road users and the legal requirement to be in a fit condition to drive, as stipulated by the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, and associated driving standards. Continuing to drive while feeling significantly unwell is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the principle of ensuring one is fit to drive. This increases the risk of accidents due to impaired concentration, reaction times, or physical control of the vehicle. Such an action could lead to breaches of the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, specifically concerning driving without due care and attention or driving while unfit. Furthermore, it demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other road users, which is a core ethical failing for any licensed driver. Another unacceptable approach is to attempt to push through the discomfort without assessing its severity or potential impact on driving ability. This is a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment of one's own condition. While the intention might be to reach a destination, the lack of objective self-assessment can lead to a dangerous situation where the driver is unaware of their declining capacity until it is too late. This approach neglects the proactive responsibility to ensure fitness to drive before and during a journey. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a self-assessment of their physical and mental state before and during driving. This involves asking, "Am I alert, focused, and physically capable of operating this vehicle safely?" If there is any doubt, the immediate action should be to stop driving in a safe location and reassess. This framework prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance over convenience or personal urgency, ensuring that the driver's actions are always defensible from both a legal and ethical standpoint. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a driver undergoing their Fermanagh driving test encounters a situation where a pedestrian is lingering near a pedestrian crossing, but has not yet stepped onto the road. The driver is approaching the crossing at the recommended speed. What is the most appropriate risk assessment and action to take? Option A. Stop the vehicle completely and wait for the pedestrian to move away from the crossing area entirely before proceeding. Option B. Maintain current speed and continue towards the crossing, assuming the pedestrian will not step out. Option C. Immediately apply the brakes firmly to come to a complete stop well before the crossing. Option D. Signal a slight reduction in speed, maintain observation of the pedestrian and the road ahead, and be prepared to stop if the pedestrian steps onto the crossing. The correct answer is D. Signal a slight reduction in speed, maintain observation of the pedestrian and the road ahead, and be prepared to stop if the pedestrian steps onto the crossing. Explanation: the scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, who has encountered a situation requiring a judgment call regarding risk assessment during their driving test. The challenge lies in balancing adherence to road rules with the need to react appropriately to unforeseen circumstances, all while under the scrutiny of an examiner. The driver must demonstrate not only technical driving skill, but also sound judgment and an understanding of risk management principles as outlined in Northern Ireland's driving regulations and the Highway Code. The best approach involves a proactive and communicative strategy that prioritizes safety and demonstrates awareness of potential hazards. This approach involves the driver clearly signaling their intention to slow down and cautiously proceeding, while observing the environment for any immediate dangers. This demonstrates an understanding of the need to assess and mitigate risk before committing to a maneuver. This aligns with the principles of defensive driving and the emphasis on hazard perception and anticipation, which are core components of the Fermanagh Driver and Vehicle Agency (DVA) testing standards. It also reflects the ethical responsibility of a driver to operate their vehicle safely and considerately. An incorrect approach would be to immediately brake sharply without any indication or assessment of the situation. This could be perceived as an overreaction, potentially causing a hazard for following traffic and demonstrating a lack of controlled decision-making. It fails to show the required hazard perception and risk assessment skills expected by the DVA. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential hazard and proceed at the original speed. This demonstrates a disregard for potential risks and a failure to adhere to the principle of driving defensively. It shows a lack of awareness of the surrounding environment and a potential violation of road safety regulations, which could lead to an unsafe situation. Finally, an approach that involves stopping the vehicle completely and waiting for an extended period without clear justification or communication to the examiner would also be considered incorrect. While caution is important, an excessive or unexplained stop can disrupt traffic flow and indicate indecisiveness or an inability to manage the driving environment effectively, which are not desirable traits for a licensed driver in Fermanagh. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, adherence to regulations, and clear communication. This involves 1. Hazard identification, recognizing potential risks in the driving environment. 2. Risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and severity of the identified hazard. 3. Decision-making, choosing the safest and most appropriate course of action based on the assessment and regulations. 4. Execution and communication, implementing the decision safely and, where appropriate, communicating intentions to other road users or the examiner. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a learner permit applicant in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has a history of 3 minor speeding violations within the last 2 years and a recent optometry report indicating a mild reduction in their visual acuity, for which corrective lenses are prescribed. If each speeding violation is assigned a risk severity score of 3, and the visual impairment, even with corrective lenses, is estimated to increase the overall risk of an incident by a factor of 1.5, and the applicant's commitment to regular eye checkups and adherence to speed limits is assessed to reduce the overall risk by a factor of 0.8. What is the adjusted risk score if the initial risk from infringements is calculated as the sum of their severities, and the final risk is determined by the formula \text final risk equals \sum text infringement severity times \text visual impairment factor times \text mitigation factor Option A 4, 5, Option B 7, 2, Option C 3, 6, Option D 12. The correct answer is C, 3, 6. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a driver's risk assessment for a learner permit application in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, requires careful consideration of potential hazards and mitigation strategies. This is professionally challenging because the applicant has a history of minor traffic infringements and a diagnosed mild visual impairment, necessitating a balanced approach between facilitating their driving aspirations and ensuring public safety. The assessment must adhere to the Road Safety Authority (RSA) guidelines and the Department for Infrastructure (DFI) Northern Ireland's licensing regulations. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that quantifies the likelihood and severity of potential incidents. This includes calculating a weighted risk score by assigning numerical values to the severity of past infringements, e.g., speeding, illegal parking, and the potential impact of the visual impairment on driving ability. For instance, if minor infringements are assigned a severity score of 2 and the visual impairment is assessed as having a moderate impact on peripheral vision, a weighted score could be calculated. The applicant's ability to mitigate these risks through corrective lenses and adherence to specific driving conditions, e.g., daytime driving only, must then be factored in. Formulas such as \text total risk equals \sum text likelihood I times text severity I text mitigation factor could be employed where text likelihood I and text severity I are assigned based on established risk matrices, and the text mitigation factor reflects the effectiveness of proposed controls. This approach aligns with the DFI's emphasis on a proactive and evidence-based assessment of driver fitness and road safety, ensuring that decisions are grounded in objective data and regulatory requirements. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the number of past infringements without considering their severity or the applicant's efforts to address them. This fails to acknowledge the nuances of risk and could lead to an overly punitive decision. Another unacceptable approach would be to disregard the visual impairment entirely, assuming corrective lenses are sufficient without a formal assessment of their efficacy in a driving context. This contravenes the DFI's mandate to ensure all drivers meet the necessary medical and visual standards for safe operation of a vehicle. Furthermore, relying solely on anecdotal evidence or subjective judgment without employing a structured, quantifiable risk assessment methodology would be a significant regulatory failure, as it lacks the objectivity and transparency required by licensing authorities. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with a thorough review of all available information, including driving history, medical reports, and any applicant-provided mitigation strategies. This should be followed by the application of a standardized risk assessment framework, incorporating quantifiable metrics where possible to evaluate the overall risk posed by the applicant. The decision should then be made by weighing the assessed risk against the regulatory requirements for licensing, with a clear justification for the outcome based on the evidence and the established framework. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that during a practical driving test in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, a driver encounters a situation where a pedestrian unexpectedly steps out from behind a parked car. The examiner observes the driver's reaction. Which of the following best describes the examiner's approach to evaluating the driver's risk assessment in this scenario? Option A. The examiner asks the driver to explain their thought process and risk assessment immediately after the incident, accepting their verbal explanation as sufficient evidence of their understanding. Option B. The examiner provides the driver with verbal cues and suggestions on how to react more safely in such situations to ensure they pass the test. Option C. The examiner meticulously observes the driver's braking, steering, and overall vehicle control to determine if they reacted promptly and appropriately to avoid a collision, documenting the specific actions taken and their effectiveness. Option D. The examiner considers the driver's previous driving experience and theoretical knowledge of hazard perception as the primary indicators of their risk assessment capabilities. The correct answer is C. The examiner meticulously observes the driver's braking, steering, and overall vehicle control to determine if they reacted promptly and appropriately to avoid a collision, documenting the specific actions taken and their effectiveness. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a new driver in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, is undergoing their practical driving test. This scenario is professionally challenging because the examiner must objectively assess the driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and in compliance with the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, and associated legislation, while also managing the inherent stress and potential anxiety of the candidate. A critical aspect of this assessment is the examiner's judgment regarding the driver's risk perception and mitigation strategies, particularly in complex or unexpected situations. The best approach involves the examiner meticulously observing the driver's actions and decision-making processes in real time, cross-referencing them against the established standards of safe driving as outlined in the Highway Code and the specific requirements for passing the Fermanagh driving test. This includes evaluating how the driver anticipates potential hazards, reacts to changing road conditions, and demonstrates an understanding of defensive driving techniques. The examiner must then document these observations factually, focusing on whether the driver's performance met the required competency levels without introducing undue risk. This aligns with the ethical duty of the examiner to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the licensing process, as mandated by the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland. An approach that relies solely on the driver's verbal assurances of their risk awareness, without concrete evidence of safe driving behavior during the test, is fundamentally flawed. It fails to provide objective proof of competency and neglects the practical application of safe driving principles. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes the driver's comfort and attempts to steer them towards safer decisions by offering excessive guidance or hints undermines the purpose of the test, which is to assess independent driving ability. This can lead to a false sense of security for the driver and compromise the examiner's impartiality. Furthermore, an approach that focuses primarily on the driver's past driving experience or theoretical knowledge, without observing their current practical skills on the road, is insufficient. The test is designed to evaluate present-day performance and adherence to current road traffic laws and safe driving practices. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes objective observation, adherence to established testing criteria, and impartial evaluation. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the Fermanagh driving test, maintaining a neutral demeanor, and documenting all observed behaviors and decisions accurately. The focus should always be on whether the candidate demonstrates the necessary skills and judgment to drive safely and legally without posing a risk to themselves or others. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver applicant in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has consistently demonstrated a high level of competence during their driving lessons, exceeding the standard requirements for basic road safety. Considering the specific road conditions and traffic patterns prevalent in Fermanagh, what is the most appropriate next step to ensure continued safe driving practices? Option A. Mandate a repetition of the standard driving lesson curriculum to reinforce fundamental skills, irrespective of the applicant's demonstrated proficiency. Option B. Conduct a targeted risk assessment to identify specific areas for supplementary guidance relevant to Fermanagh's driving environment, focusing on advanced hazard perception and defensive driving techniques. Option C. Conclude that no further development is necessary as the applicant has already met the basic licensing requirements. Option D. Recommend immediate enrollment in an advanced driving course, typically designed for professional fleet drivers. The correct answer is B. Conduct a targeted risk assessment to identify specific areas for supplementary guidance relevant to Fermanagh's driving environment, focusing on advanced hazard perception and defensive driving techniques. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver applicant in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has consistently demonstrated a high level of competence during their driving lessons, exceeding the standard requirements for basic road safety. The challenge here lies in determining the appropriate level of additional training or assessment to ensure continued safe driving practices without unnecessarily burdening the applicant or delaying their licensing, especially considering the specific road conditions and traffic patterns prevalent in Fermanagh. This requires a nuanced understanding of the Northern Ireland road traffic, NI, legislation, and the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, guidelines for licensing. The best approach involves a proactive risk assessment that acknowledges the applicant's demonstrated skill while identifying potential areas for continued development relevant to the Fermanagh environment. This includes considering local driving habits, common hazards specific to rural and urban areas within Fermanagh, e.g., narrow country lanes, livestock, specific junction types, and the applicant's personal circumstances or driving history if available. The goal is to provide targeted, supplementary guidance rather than generic, repetitive training. This aligns with the DVA's objective of licensing safe and responsible drivers, promoting continuous improvement, and ensuring that drivers are prepared for the realities of driving in Northern Ireland. An approach that solely relies on repeating standard lessons, regardless of demonstrated proficiency, is inefficient and fails to address the specific nuances of advanced safe driving in Fermanagh. It overlooks the opportunity to tailor training to the applicant's strengths and potential areas for growth, potentially leading to disengagement and a missed opportunity for specialized skill enhancement. Another unacceptable approach would be to immediately recommend advanced driving courses designed for professional drivers or fleet management. While these courses promote high safety standards, they may be overly intensive and costly for a new driver who has already met the basic licensing requirements. This approach does not represent a proportionate response to the applicant's current skill level and the specific needs of a private car driver in Fermanagh. Finally, an approach that dismisses the need for any further development simply because the applicant has passed their initial tests is negligent. The DVA's mandate extends beyond initial licensing to fostering a culture of lifelong road safety. Ignoring potential areas for refinement, even in highly competent drivers, fails to uphold this responsibility and could inadvertently increase risk over time. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicant's performance against established standards. This should be followed by a contextual assessment, considering the specific driving environment, Fermanagh, and the applicant's individual needs. The framework then involves identifying targeted interventions that are proportionate, effective, and aligned with regulatory objectives, prioritizing continuous improvement and risk mitigation. Question 13. The performance metrics show a notable increase in near-miss incidents reported by driving instructors across the Fermanagh area. Considering the need for effective risk management and public safety, which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and ethically sound response? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the near-miss incident data to identify common contributing factors, locations, and driver behaviors, and subsequently develop targeted educational campaigns and review local traffic management strategies. Option B. Classify the reported near misses as isolated incidents and maintain the current road safety strategies without further investigation. Option C. Immediately implement a significant increase in fines and penalties for all traffic violations within the Fermanagh area to deter risky driving. Option D. Increase the frequency of standard driving tests for all new and existing drivers in Fermanagh to ensure a higher baseline of driving competence. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the near-miss incident data to identify common contributing factors, locations, and driver behaviors, and subsequently develop targeted educational campaigns and review local traffic management strategies. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in the Fermanagh area regarding driver behavior, specifically an increase in near-miss incidents reported by driving instructors. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires proactive intervention to prevent potential accidents and ensure public safety, aligning with the core responsibilities of road safety authorities in Northern Ireland. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and ethically sound approach to address the rising risk without unduly penalizing responsible drivers or misallocating resources. The best approach involves a multifaceted strategy that focuses on data-driven interventions and targeted education. This includes analyzing the specific types and locations of near misses to identify patterns, then developing tailored educational campaigns and potentially adjusting local traffic calming measures. This aligns with the principles of risk management and public safety enshrined in Northern Ireland's road traffic legislation, which emphasizes prevention and continuous improvement in road safety. The focus on understanding the root causes of the increased near misses, rather than immediate punitive measures, is ethically sound as it aims to improve driver behavior through understanding and education, thereby enhancing overall road safety for all users in Fermanagh. An approach that immediately proposes increased fines and penalties for all drivers in the Fermanagh area, without a detailed analysis of the near-miss data, is ethically problematic and potentially ineffective, risks alienating the driving public, and may not address the specific behaviors contributing to the incidents. This fails to adhere to a principle of proportionality in enforcement and lacks the evidence base required for effective policy. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the near-miss reports as anecdotal and take no action. This demonstrates a failure in due diligence and a disregard for potential emerging safety issues. Regulatory frameworks in Northern Ireland expect proactive monitoring and response to indicators of increased risk, and ignoring such data would be a dereliction of duty, potentially leading to preventable accidents. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on increasing the frequency of standard driving tests without understanding the specific issues contributing to near misses is inefficient. While testing is a crucial component of driver licensing, it does not directly address the behavioral or environmental factors that might be causing an increase in hazardous situations between tests. This approach misdirects resources and fails to tackle the underlying problem effectively. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data analysis, risk assessment, and evidence-based interventions. This involves understanding the context of the problem, identifying potential solutions, evaluating their feasibility and ethical implications, and implementing the most appropriate course of action, with continuous monitoring and evaluation. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that the Fermanagh Driver Testing Centre has not systematically reviewed its risk assessment procedures in light of the increasing prevalence of advanced driver assistance systems (ADAS) in new vehicles. Which of the following approaches best addresses this finding to ensure ongoing compliance with road safety standards in Northern Ireland? Option A. Implement informal, on-the-spot adjustments to the test for candidates using vehicles equipped with ADAS without formal documentation or training. Option B. Continue testing with existing criteria, assuming candidates will learn to manage ADAS independently after passing their test. Option C. Focus exclusively on traditional driving skills, deeming ADAs as supplementary features that do not fundamentally alter the core requirements of safe driving. Option D. Proactively update the driving test syllabus and practical assessment criteria to include the safe operation and understanding of common ADAS features, supported by comprehensive examiner training. The correct answer is D. Proactively update the driving test syllabus and practical assessment criteria to include the safe operation and understanding of common ADAS features, supported by comprehensive examiner training. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential gap in the Fermanagh Driver Testing Center's risk assessment procedures concerning the integration of new vehicle technologies. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the testing center to balance the need for efficient and up-to-date testing with the paramount importance of public safety and regulatory compliance. The introduction of advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS, and other novel vehicle features necessitates a proactive and informed approach to risk management, rather than a reactive one. Careful judgment is required to ensure that testing protocols remain relevant and effective in assessing a candidate's ability to operate modern vehicles safely, without introducing undue complexity or bias. The best professional practice involves a systematic and documented review of the testing syllabus and practical assessment criteria to incorporate the implications of new vehicle technologies. This approach ensures that the Fermanagh Driver Testing Centre remains compliant with the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981 and associated regulations, which mandate that driving tests assess a candidate's ability to drive safely and competently. By proactively identifying potential risks associated with ADAS and other technologies, e.g., over-reliance, misunderstanding of system limitations, and updating training materials and assessment methods accordingly, the center upholds its duty of care. This ensures that newly qualified drivers are equipped to handle the complexities of modern vehicles, thereby enhancing road safety across Fermanagh. An approach that focuses solely on existing vehicle types without acknowledging the rapid evolution of automotive technology is professionally unacceptable. This failure to adapt constitutes a breach of the implicit requirement to maintain testing standards relevant to current road conditions and vehicle capabilities. It risks producing drivers who may be unprepared for the safety features and operational nuances of vehicles they are likely to encounter, potentially leading to increased accident risks and non-compliance with the spirit of road safety legislation. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to implement ad hoc training or assessment modifications for new technologies without a formal risk assessment or syllabus review. This can lead to inconsistencies in testing standards, potential bias against candidates who may not have access to vehicles equipped with these technologies for practice, and a lack of clear guidance for examiners. Such an approach undermines the integrity and fairness of the testing process and fails to provide a robust framework for evaluating driver competency in the context of evolving vehicle technology. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness and validation is also professionally unsound. Rushing to incorporate new technologies without adequate research, examiner training, or pilot testing can result in flawed assessment criteria that do not accurately measure a candidate's ability to operate safely. This can lead to either unqualified drivers passing the test or qualified drivers failing due to poorly designed assessments, both of which are detrimental to road safety and public confidence in the testing system. Professionals should employ a continuous improvement framework for risk assessment. This involves regular monitoring of automotive technology trends, consultation with industry experts and regulatory bodies, and a structured process for updating testing syllabi and examiner training. The decision-making process should prioritize evidence-based adjustments that demonstrably enhance the assessment of safe driving practices in contemporary vehicles, ensuring that the Fermanagh Driver Testing Center consistently meets its safety and regulatory obligations. Question 15. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a driver preparing to leave their driveway in Fermanagh notices that their rearview mirror is slightly fogged due to recent rain. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with road safety regulations and professional driving standards? Option A. Ignore the fogging, as it is a minor inconvenience and the driver is familiar with the immediate surroundings. Option B. Thoroughly clean the mirror to ensure clear visibility before proceeding, and if unable to do so immediately, postpone the journey until the mirror is clear. Option C. Wipe the mirror with a sleeve or cloth quickly before driving, assuming it will be sufficient for safe operation. Option D. Proceed with caution, relying more on side mirrors and head checks, as the fogging is minor and unlikely to cause a significant issue. Correct answer is B. Thoroughly clean the mirror to ensure clear visibility before proceeding, and if unable to do so immediately, postpone the journey until the mirror is clear. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the overarching legal and safety obligations mandated by the Fermanagh Driver Handbook and the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1995. The temptation to proceed without a full assessment of risk, especially when a minor inconvenience is involved, is significant. However, the primary duty of a driver is to ensure the safety of themselves and others, which necessitates adherence to established procedures. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, documented risk assessment that considers all potential hazards, even those that seem minor. This approach aligns with the fundamental principles of road safety and the legal requirements for drivers in Northern Ireland. Specifically, it mandates that drivers proactively identify and mitigate risks before commencing a journey. This includes evaluating factors such as road conditions, visibility, vehicle condition, and the presence of other road users. By undertaking this comprehensive assessment, the driver demonstrates a commitment to responsible driving, fulfilling their duty of care as outlined in the Fermanagh Driver Handbook and the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1995. This proactive stance is crucial for preventing accidents and ensuring compliance with traffic laws. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding without a full risk assessment, despite a minor inconvenience like a slightly obscured mirror, is professionally unacceptable. This action directly contravenes the spirit and letter of road safety regulations, which emphasize a comprehensive understanding of potential hazards. It prioritizes personal convenience over the safety of oneself and other road users, a clear ethical failure. Furthermore, assuming that a minor issue poses no significant risk without proper evaluation is a form of negligence. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the potential consequences of impaired visibility or control. This approach fails to meet the standard of care expected of any licensed driver in Northern Ireland. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when faced with potential risks. This involves 1. Identifying the hazard, e.g., obscured mirror. 2. Assessing the severity and likelihood of harm. 3. Evaluating available control measures, e.g., cleaning the mirror, adjusting position, or postponing the journey. 4. Implementing the chosen control measure. 5. Reviewing the effectiveness of the control measure. In this context, the professional driver would recognize that even a minor obstruction can have significant safety implications and would prioritize a complete risk assessment before proceeding. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver applicant in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, exhibits significant confidence and a tendency to exceed speed limits and undertake risky overtakes during practice. Which of the following represents the most appropriate professional response for the examiner? Option A. Focus on the applicant's positive attitude and willingness to learn, overlooking minor infringements of speed limits and overtaking rules. Option B. Pass the applicant. Acknowledging their confidence and assuming their eagerness to pass will lead to improved behavior once licensed. Option C. Advise the applicant to be more cautious in future, but still pass them if their overall demeanor suggests they are a generally safe driver. Option D. Objectively assess all driving actions against the DVA standards and the Highway Code, recording any faults, including those related to speed and overtaking, regardless of the applicant's confidence. The correct answer is D. Objectively assess all driving actions against the DVA standards and the Highway Code, recording any faults, including those related to speed and overtaking, regardless of the applicant's confidence. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver applicant in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has consistently demonstrated a high level of confidence during their practice sessions, often exceeding the speed limits on rural roads and frequently undertaking risky overtaking maneuvers. This scenario is professionally challenging because the examiner must balance the applicant's apparent self-assurance with a rigorous adherence to road safety regulations and the legal requirements for obtaining a driving license in Northern Ireland. The examiner's duty is to ensure the applicant is not only competent, but also safe and responsible, which overrides any perceived confidence or eagerness to pass. The best approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's driving behavior against the standards set by the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland. This means meticulously observing for any infringements of the Highway Code and the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, particularly concerning speed, safe overtaking, and general road positioning. If the applicant's actions, such as exceeding speed limits or performing dangerous overtakes, constitute driving faults or serious/dangerous faults, these must be recorded and will lead to a failure. The examiner's decision must be based solely on the observed driving performance and its compliance with the law and DVA standards, irrespective of the applicant's confidence. This aligns with the DVA's mandate to ensure only safe and competent drivers are licensed, thereby protecting public safety on Northern Ireland's roads. An approach that overlooks or downplays the observed speed infringements and risky overtaking maneuvers due to the applicant's confidence is professionally unacceptable. This would constitute a failure to uphold the DVA's safety standards and could lead to an unqualified driver being licensed, creating a significant risk to other road users. Similarly, an approach that focuses on the applicant's positive attitude rather than their actual driving performance fails to address the core requirements of the test, which are safety and competence. Allowing a driver to pass who demonstrates a disregard for speed limits and safe overtaking practices violates the principles of responsible driving and the legal framework governing road use in Northern Ireland. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective observation and adherence to established standards. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal and regulatory requirements e.g. Road Traffic Northern Ireland, Order 1981, Highway Code. 2. Meticulously observing and recording all driving actions. 3. Evaluating these actions against the defined fault criteria. And 4. Making a decision based solely on the evidence of the driving performance, without being influenced by subjective factors like applicant confidence or perceived eagerness. Question 17. Strategic planning requires a driver in Fermanagh to consider upcoming vehicle maintenance and documentation. If a driver's MOT certificate is due to expire the day before a planned long-distance journey, what is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Drive the vehicle without a valid MOT certificate for the journey, as the vehicle is perceived to be roadworthy and the MOT is a bureaucratic requirement. Option B. Proceed with the journey as planned, assuming the vehicle is in good condition, and attempt to get the MOT done on the day of travel if time permits. Option C. Book the MOT for the day the certificate expires and hope for an immediate pass, planning to depart immediately after if successful. Option D. Ensure the MOT certificate is renewed well in advance of the expiry date, ideally several weeks prior, to allow for any necessary repairs and to guarantee legal compliance for the journey. The correct answer is D. Ensure the MOT certificate is renewed well in advance of the expiry date, ideally several weeks prior, to allow for any necessary repairs and to guarantee legal compliance for the journey. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the overarching legal and safety obligations mandated by the Fermanagh Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, regulations. The temptation to take a shortcut, even if seemingly minor, can lead to a breach of regulations and potentially compromise road safety. Careful judgment is required to prioritize compliance and safety over expediency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and compliant approach to vehicle maintenance and documentation. This means ensuring the vehicle is in a roadworthy condition and that all required documentation, including a valid MOT certificate, is up to date and readily available. This approach aligns directly with the Fermanagh DVA's emphasis on roadworthiness and legal compliance, as outlined in the Road Traffic Northern Ireland, Order 1981, and associated regulations. By adhering to these requirements, the driver demonstrates responsibility and a commitment to public safety, thereby avoiding potential penalties and ensuring legal operation of the vehicle. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the journey without a valid MOT certificate, even if the driver believes the vehicle is in good condition, is a regulatory failure. The MOT test is a mandatory safety inspection designed to identify potential defects that could compromise roadworthiness. Operating a vehicle without a current MOT certificate is a direct contravention of the Road Traffic, Northern Ireland, Order 1981, which can result in fines and penalty points. Attempting to obtain an MOT certificate at the last minute on the day of travel, without prior booking or assurance of availability, is also professionally unsound. This approach introduces uncertainty and risks noncompliance if the test cannot be completed or if defects are found that require immediate repair. It prioritizes a rushed solution over a planned and compliant one, potentially leading to the same regulatory breaches as not having the certificate at all. Ignoring the MOT requirement altogether because the vehicle is perceived to be in good condition demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of regulatory obligations. The MOT is not merely a subjective assessment of condition, but a legally mandated inspection process. Relying solely on personal judgment bypasses a critical safety check and is a direct violation of the law, exposing the driver to significant legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to compliance. This involves understanding all relevant legal requirements, such as those pertaining to vehicle roadworthiness and documentation as enforced by the Fermanagh DVA. A robust decision-making process would involve 1. Identifying all legal obligations e.g., MOT insurance tax. 2. Proactively scheduling and completing necessary checks and renewals well in advance of deadlines. 3. Assessing potential risks associated with noncompliance, fines, license suspension, safety hazards. 4. Prioritizing compliance and safety over convenience or perceived cost savings. Question 18. The assessment process reveals a candidate approaching a junction in Fermanagh, failing to observe a vehicle approaching rapidly from the right. The candidate appears distracted and is not slowing down. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the driving instructor to take to ensure safety and maintain the integrity of the assessment? Option A. Stop the vehicle at the earliest safe opportunity and terminate the test due to the candidate's apparent lack of awareness. Option B. Intervene by applying the brake to prevent a potential collision, then allow the candidate to continue the assessment while observing their reaction to the intervention. Option C. Immediately take full control of the vehicle and steer away from the danger, overriding the candidate's actions entirely. Option D. Allow the candidate to proceed, trusting they will notice the approaching vehicle at the last moment and react appropriately. The correct answer is B. Intervene by applying the brake to prevent a potential collision, then allow the candidate to continue the assessment while observing their reaction to the intervention. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need to assess the candidate's ability to handle a potentially hazardous situation with the overarching responsibility to ensure public safety and adhere to the strict assessment criteria set by the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, in Northern Ireland. The instructor must make a rapid, judgment-based decision under pressure, considering the candidate's skill level, the severity of the hazard, and the potential consequences of different actions. The ethical imperative is to conduct a fair and accurate assessment that upholds the standards of road safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the instructor intervening only when the candidate's actions or inactions pose an immediate and serious danger to themselves, other road users, or property. This approach aligns with the DVA's assessment guidelines, which permit instructor intervention to prevent an accident. The instructor's role is to observe and assess the candidate's independent decision-making and vehicle control. Intervention should be a last resort, used to avert a critical incident, and then the assessment continues to evaluate the candidate's response to the instructor's intervention and their subsequent ability to regain control and safety. This ensures the assessment remains focused on the candidate's performance while prioritizing safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to allow the candidate to proceed without intervention, even when their actions are clearly leading to a dangerous situation. This fails to uphold the instructor's duty of care and the DVA's mandate to ensure only competent drivers are licensed. It could result in an accident, compromising safety, and leading to a failed assessment due to a critical error. Another incorrect approach is to intervene prematurely for minor errors or potential hazards that the candidate might have been able to manage. This undermines the purpose of the test, which is to assess the candidate's independent driving skills and judgment. It also creates an unfair assessment, as the candidate is not given the opportunity to demonstrate their abilities under realistic driving conditions. A further incorrect approach is to take over the controls completely and steer the vehicle away from the hazard without allowing the candidate any opportunity to react or recover. While this might prevent an immediate accident, it completely negates the assessment of the candidate's ability to handle the situation, rendering the test invalid and failing to meet the DVA's assessment objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves continuously assessing the immediate and potential risks presented by the driving environment and the candidate's actions. The instructor must have a clear understanding of the DVA's assessment criteria and intervention protocols. When a situation escalates towards a critical risk, the instructor must act decisively to prevent harm, prioritizing safety above all else. Following intervention, the instructor must then reevaluate the candidate's ability to continue the assessment safely and competently, documenting the incident and the subsequent actions taken. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a new driver in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has demonstrated a consistent pattern of hesitant braking and fluctuating speed during their recent driving lessons. Considering the potential risks associated with these behaviors on public roads, which of the following represents the most appropriate professional response? Option A. Immediately report the driver's performance to the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, as a potential safety hazard, requesting further assessment without attempting any remedial instruction. Option B. Continue with the standard driving lesson curriculum, assuming the driver will naturally improve these skills over time without specific intervention. Option C. Focus exclusively on building the driver's confidence and reducing their anxiety, deferring any technical correction of braking and speed control until they appear more relaxed. Option D. Conduct a detailed risk assessment of the observed behaviors. Develop targeted practice exercises to address hesitant braking and speed control, and communicate clearly with the learner about the safety implications and the plan for improvement. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed risk assessment of the observed behaviors, develop targeted practice exercises to address hesitant braking and speed control, and communicate clearly with the learner about the safety implications and the plan for improvement. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a new driver in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, has been identified as exhibiting a pattern of hesitant braking and inconsistent speed maintenance during their recent driving lessons. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need to ensure public safety with the developmental stage of the learner driver. A premature decision to withhold further instruction could be demotivating, while delaying necessary intervention could pose a risk to the driver and others on the road. Careful judgment is required to assess the root cause of the observed behaviors and implement an appropriate remedial strategy. The best approach involves a structured risk assessment that prioritizes immediate safety while facilitating learning. This means identifying the specific behaviors, evaluating their potential impact on road safety in the context of Fermanagh's road conditions, e.g., rural roads, varying weather, and then developing a targeted intervention plan. This plan would include focused practice on the identified weaknesses, clear communication with the learner about the risks, and a gradual progression of difficulty. This aligns with the principles of responsible driver training, aiming to produce competent and safe drivers, and implicitly adheres to the spirit of the Driver and Vehicle Agency, DVA, guidelines for driver instruction, which emphasize safety and competence development, an approach that involves immediately escalating the issue to the DVA, without attempting any further targeted instruction or assessment, is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the instructor's primary role in guiding and correcting the learner, and could be seen as an overreaction without due diligence. Another unacceptable approach is to ignore the observed behaviors and continue with the standard lesson plan, hoping the issues will resolve themselves. This demonstrates a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment and a disregard for the potential safety implications, contravening the instructor's duty of care and the DVA's expectation of proactive intervention. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the learner's confidence without addressing the underlying technical deficiencies in braking and speed control is also flawed, as it prioritizes emotional well-being over the critical skills required for safe driving. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with observation and data collection, followed by analysis of potential risks. This analysis should then inform the development of a tailored intervention strategy. Regular review and adaptation of this strategy based on the learner's progress are crucial. This systematic process ensures that decisions are evidence-based, proportionate, and aligned with professional responsibilities and regulatory expectations. Question 20. Analysis of a recent driving lesson in Fermanagh. A learner driver is concerned about the cost of fuel for their upcoming longer journeys. The instructor needs to calculate the estimated fuel cost for a 150 km trip, given the vehicle's average fuel efficiency of 6.5 liters per 100 km, and the current fuel price in Fermanagh is £1.50 per liter. What is the estimated total fuel cost for this journey? Option A, £9.75. Option B, £10.00. Option C, £22.50. Option D, £14.63. The correct answer is D, £14.63. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, by requiring the calculation of fuel efficiency and cost under varying conditions. The challenge lies in accurately applying the principles of fuel consumption to a real-world driving scenario, ensuring the client understands the practical implications for their driving habits and potential cost savings. It demands not just theoretical knowledge, but the ability to translate that into a tangible, quantifiable outcome for the learner. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves calculating the total fuel consumed for the journey using the vehicle's stated fuel efficiency, and then determining the cost based on the current price of fuel in Fermanagh. This is correct because it directly addresses the practical financial aspect of driving, which is a crucial consideration for any new driver. The calculation is straightforward. Total distance equals 150 km, fuel efficiency equals 6.5 liters per 100 km, total fuel consumed equals 150 km/100 km, asterisk 6.5 liters/100 km equals 9.75 liters, fuel price equals £1.50 per liter, total fuel cost equals 9.75 liters, asterisk £1.50/liter equals £14.63. This method is grounded in the practical realities of vehicle operation and aligns with the objective of preparing drivers for responsible and cost-aware motoring, a key aspect of the Fermanagh driver theory test syllabus, which often includes elements of vehicle operation and maintenance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply state the fuel efficiency without performing any cost calculation. This fails to provide the learner with a complete understanding of the financial implications of their driving, neglecting a key practical aspect of vehicle ownership and operation. It misses the opportunity to educate on cost management. Another incorrect approach would be to estimate the fuel cost based on a general assumption rather than a precise calculation. This introduces an unnecessary level of inaccuracy and does not demonstrate the professional diligence required in providing factual information. It undermines the credibility of the advice given. A further incorrect approach would be to only consider the distance traveled and not factor in the vehicle's specific fuel consumption rate. This would lead to a completely inaccurate estimation of fuel usage and cost, failing to address the core of the problem, and providing misleading information to the learner. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such scenarios by first identifying the core objective, to educate the learner on the practical financial aspects of driving. This involves breaking down the problem into its constituent parts: distance, fuel efficiency, fuel price, and applying the correct mathematical formulas to arrive at an accurate and meaningful result. The process should be transparent, allowing the learner to follow the calculations and understand the underlying principles. This fosters a deeper learning experience and promotes responsible driving habits.